and welcome to Effective Communication Part 2. Last week we put out a video of Effective Communication Part 1. So let's quickly revise what we have done. So in Part 1, we first of all understood what communication is. What is communication? Communication is that tool that helps us to build a relationship better with the people around us. It is us trying to get a message across to the other person and the other person to understand it, right? We also said that communication is primarily of two types, which is verbal and non-verbal. And last time we covered the verbal part of it. So under verbal communication, we basically covered speech, language, and vocabulary as components of verbal communication. But I'm not going to go into that in detail. In case you have any questions about what these are about, definitely go and revisit that video that we have put out for you. Now, let's talk about non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication, as we mentioned last time, has two aspects, which is basically body language and voice and tonality. But before we get into any of this, let us first understand why non-verbal communication is so very important. I mean, why is it so important that we're having a whole session on it? Okay, let me explain this. Let us imagine all of communication as this big pie chart over here, right? Now, this is 100%. Out of this 100%, it's very interesting. Do you know how much the impact of verbal communication or words is? Well, you'll be surprised to know that out of this entire pie chart of 100%, the impact of verbal communication or words is actually just 7%. We pay so much importance to speech and words, and my words should come out right. Yes, they are definitely very important, but this is only actually 7% of the impact of communication. 55% of the impact of communication is body language and 38% is voice and tonality. What does this mean? Body language and voice and tonality together make non-verbal communication. So 55 plus 38% gives us 93% of the impact of communication is non-verbal communication, which means that if there is ever a jhagda or a clash between verbal and non-verbal, people are going to believe non-verbal. Let me give you an example to explain this. Supposing I look at all of you, I say, you know what? Today's session is going to be a very exciting session. Now, what am I saying? I'm using the words exciting. But what is my body language like? What is my voice like? What is my non-verbal communication like? It's looking bored. So, in this case, are you going to believe my words? Or are you going to believe my non-verbal communication? Well, research says that because 93% of the impact is non-verbal communication, you will believe my non-verbal communication, right? And this is why non-verbal communication is so very important. We have to be aware of what is the message that we are giving out in terms of our body language and voice, right? Now, today's session specifically, we're going to be dealing with body language. And the next session, that is part 3, we will be talking about voice. So, moving into body language, let us understand the different components of body language. We are going to be dealing with eye contact. We're going to be dealing with gestures, posture, and facial expressions, as all of these are components of body language. Let's go into each of these in a little bit more detail. So, what is eye contact? Shh, look into my eyes. Well, most people know and say that eye contact is very, very important because it helps us to make the other person feel like we are interested in them. Supposing, for example, you ask me, "How are you, Tarana ma'am?" And I don't look at you and I look the other side and I say, I'm fine. How are you going to feel? You're not going to feel very good, right? But on the other hand, if you ask me, how are you, Tarana ma'am? And I look at you and I smile, I say, I'm fantastic, thank you. How does that make you feel? That makes you feel good, right? Because it makes you feel like I'm interested in what you're asking or interested in what you're saying. So eye contact actually helps to build relationships in a much better way. It helps the other person see that you're sincere. It helps the other person see that you're honest, and therefore definitely goes ahead and builds trust. So it builds trust, it builds understanding, and builds better relationships. But I always say that any tool, okay, whether it is eye contact or anything else, basically, we should use it, but we should not overuse something. Which means I'm saying look into the eyes, make eye contact, but don't stare into the person's eyes like that. Just imagine you go to your principal's office and the principal is saying something to you and you said, Tarana, ma'am said that I must make eye contact. So you stare into the principal's eyes like that. Now the principal will probably think that you're being quite rude, right? Or maybe in our Indian culture, if we look straight into the eyes of our grandparents or some senior citizen, they're probably going to think that we're very arrogant, right? So we definitely have to keep the situation in mind. We definitely have to keep who we are talking to in mind. And I would say use eye contact majority of the time. But so 75% of the time, maybe you can use eye contact, look at the person so that the person feels that you're interested, but don't like stare into the person's eyes, because that could be quite intimidating or maybe will give out the wrong message, right? Okay, this is eye contact. Let's move on to our next component, which is basically gestures. Now, what are gestures? Gestures are movements of the hand. So, for example, if I say, oh yeah, you're looking for that classroom is right down there. Right now, what have I done? I'm giving you a verbal message. I'm speaking with words, and then I'm using my hands to give you a better message. I'm using my gestures to support my verbal or support my words. So this automatically gives the listener or the audience a better understanding of my verbal message. It gives them more visual clarity. Okay, the classroom is that way. It gives them a visual picture, right? And it tells them a lot about our feeling, our attitude, and basically gestures are very, very helpful. But once again, disclaimer, use gestures, but do not overuse them. If you're going to use gestures for everything and you're saying, oh, you know what, I was walking on the road, then I went for a sip of water, and then my teacher wrote something on the blackboard, what are you going to do? You're going to land up distracting the other person. What is your goal? Your goal is to get the message across. So use gestures to the extent that you are supporting the verbal message, not to the extent that you are distracting someone. Otherwise, the goal of communication is not met, right? Okay, on to the third component, which is posture. Now, you must have heard your parents or your grandparents say many times, stand straight, don't slouch, sit or stand with your shoulders back. What is this? This is basically posture. Posture is basically the way we stand or the way we sit. And a good posture is spine erect, shoulders back, right? As opposed to slouching. Most people will say don't slouch. Now, why is this so important? First of all, we have to understand that posture gives out a good, confident feeling if you have good posture. Supposing I look at all of you, I slump my shoulders, my posture is not good, and I look down and I say, actually I'm very confident. Am I looking confident? Definitely not. But if I have my shoulders back and my spine straight and I say, I'm very confident, are you going to believe that? Definitely. So good posture shows confidence, shows respect, right? And by the way, another very interesting thing is that posture actually helps us to have better voice, to have better tonality. I will be talking about voice and tonality next time, but let's just understand how posture affects our voice. So first of all, how do we talk? Well, we talk because, very simple, we breathe, right? If people don't breathe, then they can't talk, which is why dead people don't talk, right? Because they can't breathe. So most of the time when your breathing is not okay, you will notice that your voice doesn't come out in the correct way. So if you're running upstairs and you're like, what I wanted to say was, that's because your breath is short. But if your breath has a good amount of breath, you're inhaling properly, you're exhaling properly, your voice will be much better. Why? Well, scientifically, if you are slouching, your lung capacity is becoming much smaller. Your lungs don't have much place to expand and contract. If it doesn't have much place to expand and contract, automatically your inhalation and exhalation is not going to be that much deeper, right? But if your spine is straight, if your shoulders are back, your lungs have enough place to move, and that means your breathing is better. And if your breathing is better, voila, your voice is better too. So remember this. Okay, next, we move on to the last component that we're going to be talking about under body language, which is basically facial expressions. Now, what are facial expressions? Facial expressions is just what emotion are we showing on our face. So, for example, smiling or frowning or looking surprised or excited, right? Now, generally, it is a known fact that if we want to show someone that we're feeling positive or we're feeling warm or we want to show friendliness, it's a good idea to smile. I just feel like most people don't smile enough, right? We should smile more often. But of course, what is important in terms of communication is communicating what we are really feeling. So your expression on your face has to match the emotion that you're feeling. Now, let me give you an example. Supposing you've done something not very good, and your principal has called you to scold you, and you look at the principal and say, oh, I want to show a warm positive feeling. So your principal is shouting at you, and you're smiling and saying, I'm sorry sir. What is the principal going to feel? Principal is going to feel that you're not honest at all, right? Are you looking sorry? No, you're not looking sorry at all. So what is the goal over here? The goal is that whatever you're feeling should be out on your face. If you're feeling sorry, then it has to be a sorry expression. It has to be a sincere expression. You cannot smile when you're being scolded or when you're being shouted at, because then there would be a mismatch, and the message that we want to give in terms of communication would not be met. Right? So we've spoken a lot about body language today. We've covered 4 components of body language: eye contact, gestures, posture, as well as facial expressions. And all of these are very, very important. So be aware, be mindful. And next time we're going to be talking about voice and tonality, which is our effective communication part 3. In the meantime, for both the channels, 6 to 8 as well as 9 to 10, we have done so many sessions for you, different sorts of sessions. Where can you find these sessions? Well, we have a repository for you. So go ahead and click on the link in the description box, and you will have access to all these wonderful sessions that we've done for you. And as always, I say, please like, share, and subscribe, because all your notifications of both the channels are out there. I'm going to see you soon. Bye-bye.